Hello class, and welcome to lecture 21 of Philosophy 205. In this lecture, we continue our discussion of free will by looking at Taylor's Freedom and Determinism. I only assigned you an excerpt from this where he goes through his theory about how free will is possible without determinism. As you recall, where we left off last time, there was a problem for the existence of free will given determinism, but it also looked like there's a problem for free will without determinism. With determinism, the problem looked like all of our actions were determined by things we had no control over, which seems to imply that there is no free will. But on the other hand, if there's indeterminism, then it seems like our actions are caused at random, again by things that we have no control over, which also doesn't look like free will. So how is free will possible when it looks like both determinism and its opposite lead to the conclusion that there's no free will? Well, Taylor raises an interesting question. He asks, can an agent cause their own actions? Now we'll see how this particular question points in the direction of a solution to the problems of free will that we discussed last time. But first, some background. Why is determinism plausible? I gave a little bit of an explanation last time, but let's think about this again. Why would anyone think that the state of the universe in the past plus the laws of nature together determine everything that's going to happen in the future? One reason why this might seem plausible and important is that when we are looking for reasons why something happened, we often, or some would say always, assume determinism. Now, why does looking for reasons assume determinism? Well, it's because when you're looking for an explanation of X, generally what you're looking for is the set of factors that led to X, or the set of factors that meant X had to be true. So if you're trying to explain why the house burned down, an explanation of that would list the factors that led to the house burning down. So that might start with the fact that the house was full of flammable materials, and it had faulty wiring, and there was an electrical surge. So together, those factors led to the house burning down. But now, when you think about what a good explanation is like, if the factors that you mention don't fully determine that X would happen, it looks like X is not fully explained. So if I only say the house burned down because there were some flammable materials in the house, I mean, that could be part of an explanation, but that doesn't seem like I've fully explained why it burned down. There can be flammable materials in a house without the house burning down. So if that's all I say, I haven't really explained it yet. It seems like if we want an explanation, the explanation has to fully determine that whatever it is we're trying to explain would happen. So if we want to know why the house burned down, the explanation we give should cite factors that determine the house would burn down. If we want to know why the moon orbits the Earth, we have to cite factors that determine that it orbits the Earth. If we want to know why most humans have 2 arms, again, we need a full explanation. But now think about this. So this implies that when we're looking for an explanation for something like a physical event, say it's a ball in flight, we will expect that things like gravity and the wind determine the path. Maybe we don't know all the factors, but we assume that there is an explanation for why a ball went exactly how it did. That the effect of gravity on it plus the wind determine where it's going to go. And so this looks like it's deterministic. When we look for an explanation of a flight like this, the flight of a ball, we're looking for something deterministic. These factors together determined that the ball would do exactly what it did. But this doesn't just apply to inanimate objects. It also applies to biology. So for example, when you take a medication and the medication eases your symptoms of a cold, the expectation is that it did this because biology and chemistry together determine a response. So maybe you wouldn't be able to predict it beforehand, maybe you don't know all the factors, but generally when we want to know why did this medication work, the thought is if we knew about your specific body makeup, your specific physiology, your specific chemistry, plus the chemistry of the medication and how it moved through your body, together those would determine the response that you got. It would determine that this medication applied to your specific body reduces the symptoms. And again, the assumption is that this is deterministic, that there is an explanation out there, and given all the factors that explain the event, your response to the medication, it fully determines what the response will be. But this goes beyond that, even to human behavior. So when you make an order at a restaurant, and the waiter gives you your order, you expect that it's something like their routine and the reasons that they have produce a response. So if you explain, why did the waiter bring me my food? Well, part of the explanation is that they've been working this job for a while and they just have a routine. When you make an order, they routinely bring it back without really thinking about it. But they also have reasons why they would want to do that, because they want a tip, because they need to work to get money so that they can stay alive. So you think if you really knew about this person and their life, that you'd be able to explain exactly why they brought you your order. And again, this seems to assume determinism, that maybe we don't know all the factors right now, but they're out there. There are reasons why you did exactly what you did and not anything else. So let's bring that back to determinism and asking why. It seems reasonable to look for explanations for things like physical events, biological events, and human actions. These are all things we seek to explain. We wonder, why did the ball break the window? Why did this medication work? Why did this person run out into the street? It's reasonable to ask why these things happened. And it seems like the assumption behind all the explanations is that they happen for a reason, and furthermore, that the reason determined the outcome. Once again, think about what you want from an explanation. If I try to explain why I stayed home instead of going to your party, you'll want an explanation that fully determines why I stayed home. I should cite enough reasons so that those reasons together determine that I stay home rather than going to the party. But that looks like it's determinism. So when we seek to explain anything that happens, it looks like the assumption is there are all these facts out there, and together those facts determine what's going to happen next. So all these explanations point to things that happened earlier, and together those earlier events determine what happens next. So we can look at it from the other side. If determinism is false, it looks like there is no explanation for a lot of events. If determinism is false, then we can't say these are the factors that led to this thing happening, because those factors won't fully determine that happened. So that means there's just going to be a gap. And so if we think explanation is important, it seems like we have to believe in determinism. So this seems like a problem, again, because determinism led to all those arguments against free will. This starts to look like even more of a problem when we look at causation in human action in more detail. One of the things that Taylor points out is that events explain other events through causation. So if we want to know why an event happened, we're going to appeal to other events, because events are caused by other events. So for example, the ball hitting the window, that's one event, caused the breaking of the window, which is another event. People voting for a particular candidate cause the election of that candidate. So again, these are events. Events cause other events. But now this leads to a problem when we start thinking about free will. So let's apply event causation to human events. So what events cause human action? It looks like they're mental events. Mental events like decisions. But if mental events cause our actions, then can we say that we cause our actions? Or does that mean we're just the event venue, so to speak? So let's think about the process of making a decision. You have a bunch of considerations to think about. So you think about them. Thinking about those considerations is an event or a series of events. That series of events, thinking about considerations, causes a decision. That decision is another mental event. And then that decision, which is a mental event, causes your actions. Now here, even though this is happening in your mind, it's just a series of events. One event causing another, causing another, causing your action. So it's just a series of events that happens inside you. But does that mean that you did it? It seems like if we really want to say what caused the action, it's not you. It's a bunch of events that happened inside you. So in this way of thinking, you aren't the cause of your actions any more than you are the cause of, I don't know, a chemical cascade that happens among some bacteria that are inside you. So even though the bacteria are inside you, that doesn't mean it's you causing whatever chemical reactions happen inside the bacteria. That's not something you did, it just happened inside you. Similarly, if there are a bunch of mental events that cause your action, is that really you doing it? Or is it just a bunch of events that happen to be inside you that make something happen? So this looks like another problem for free will. So we keep getting more and more problems for free will. Another problem is thinking about causes, the nature of a cause in general. So the issue is causes are sufficient conditions. Which means if you take all the causes into account, together they determine the effect. So when we say that something is a sufficient condition, that means as long as that condition is there, it's sufficient for the effect to be there. There might be other ways to get the same effect, but this cause is sufficient. So if we consider all the causes of an event, together they're sufficient to determine that the event will happen exactly as it does. So once we know all the causes of a house burning down, those causes together determined that the house would burn down exactly the way it did. So this is just the nature of causation. This is how we think about causation in general. Causation is events leading to other events, and causes are sufficient conditions. But as I've suggested, this causes some problems. So we can think about the events that lead to decisions within us. And there are a couple different ways to think about it. So first of all, if our actions are caused by reasons, so if the events that cause our actions are, we think about the reasons and the thought of certain reasons leads to decisions and so on, well then I don't cause my actions. The reasons caused my actions. And that's not free will, because again, I didn't have a choice. It was the reasons within me that caused the action, not free will. But on the other hand, if my actions are not caused at all, then I certainly don't cause them. And if I don't cause them, then that's not free will. So it looks like we have a problem. We try to figure out what causes our actions, and we try to look for which events cause our actions. It's not going to be us that causes our actions. It's just going to be various events that happen in our minds. So if we try to say, okay, it's not events causing our actions, well, it looks like only events can cause other events. So if we're trying to explain an event, like an action we performed, like walking out of the room, if we want to explain why we walked out of the room by appealing to events, then that's not us walking out of the room. We didn't do it. If we try to say that there's nothing that caused it, then again, no free will. So there's a series of problems now. Now we have several different ways of arguing against the existence of free will. So if it causes our events, and only events cause other events, then to explain our actions, which are events, we appeal to other events, not to us. I am not an event, I'm a person. And yet, responsibility seems very important. So we normally assume that we're responsible for our actions, and we assume other people are responsible for their actions. We normally assume that multiple options are genuinely available to us. When we make a decision, we don't think, well, there's one thing that I'm definitely going to do. I don't know what it is yet, but I don't really have multiple options available. We normally think, there's more than one thing I could do right now, and I have to make a decision, and my decision determines what I'm going to do, not anything else. Right, so we normally assume that our decisions determine what happens. So we assume indeterminism. And furthermore, we assume that it's us. It's not just events that happen within us, it's me. I decide whether I'm going to leave the room. So where does that leave us? This leaves us with what Taylor suggests is a theory of agent causation. He thinks there is a way to explain how free will can exist that overcomes all of these problems. First of all, he lays out a system of requirements that any theory of agency has to meet. So a theory of agency just means a theory of human action, of deliberate action. He thinks that one requirement of a theory of agency is it should say that agents sometimes cause their actions. If your theory of agency says people never cause their own actions, then that's a bad theory of agency according to Taylor. Furthermore, he thinks the previous state of the universe can't determine actions. So if your theory of agency says, given the state of the universe, that always determines which action somebody will take, that's a bad theory of agency according to Taylor. However, a good theory of action should say we sometimes act for reasons. Now, it's maybe possible that sometimes we do something for no reason, but most of the time, when we do something, we do it for a reason. We can even often say what the reason was. If your theory of agency says that agents don't act for reasons, then that's a bad theory of agency. On the other hand, for reasons we discussed earlier, reasons can't fully cause action. Because again, if it's the reasons that cause the action, then the action was already determined, and it wasn't us. It wasn't me. I wasn't the one that made the decision. So there must be room for choice as a separate component cause that's in addition to the reasons. Now, how can we come up with a theory of agency that fulfills all of these requirements? How can we say that an agent sometimes causes their action? Notice what he's saying here. An agent isn't an event. So previously we said events cause other events. It's the ball hitting the window that causes the window to break. So we might sometimes say it's the ball that causes the window to break. But if you really think about it, it's not just the ball itself. It's the fact that the ball hit the window. So it's that event of hitting the window that caused the window to break. But here we're not saying it's any particular event related to an agent, it's just the agent. So how does this work? Taylor introduces the concept of the self or a person, and he believes that this is a special kind of entity. So this is a being capable of directing its own activity. And for his theory to work, it can't be a purely natural being. So his way out of all these problems is to say that normally, in the natural course of events, events cause other events. It's never things that cause events. But there is one special category of persons or selves, and selves operate by different rules. And that's where free will comes in. So let's think of it this way. According to Taylor, a self is a special kind of entity that can affect the course of natural events through decisions in a way that's not caused by previous events. So the idea is we've got the course of nature coming along here. And so uninterrupted, nature would follow this course. However, there are these special entities, selves or persons. So here's a self. And this self can step in and interrupt the normal flow of natural events, so that instead of continuing along the way it was going before, it now will branch off and follow a different route. So this moment here is a moment of decision. So the moment of decision is where a self, which is outside of nature, steps in and causes a change in the course of natural events. But notice, it's not any event that happens in the self. It's just the self. The self is this special kind of non-natural entity outside of nature that comes in and can, without relying on specific events, can just make the course of nature change. Now you can probably see why, according to Taylor, it has to be non-natural. Because, let's take this out of the picture. If we take the non-natural agent out of the picture, nature will just continue to unfold the way it did before. And so if nature just unfolds the way it did before, there's no decision. And so this is true even if we think nature is not deterministic. So let's get rid of more of this. So let's think about what it means for nature to be not deterministic. That means if nature just unfolds normally, the course of nature will be like this. There will be different moments where events could branch off and go different ways. So these branch points are random events that have multiple possible outcomes. So they might be an electron going one direction rather than another in quantum mechanics. But the point is, these are just purely natural events. Nature more or less goes along, follows its course, and every once in a while it randomly splits off so that there's more than one way it might go. But that's not anyone making a choice. So even here, this is the version of determinism we talked about last time, the version of determinism that is a problem for free will. In order to escape this problem, we need something else. We need that self. Put the self back in there. We need this self that's going to step in and change the course of nature. So this is the picture of agency that he's talking about. There are these selves that exist outside of nature. They can change the course of nature without being part of nature. And they change the course of nature without themselves having events happening within them. So we can put this in the theory of agent causation. The theory says sometimes a being is a cause without an event being a cause. So an example would be, I can cause my arm to rise, but no event fully caused that to happen. All right, so how does this meet all of the requirements that he wanted it to meet? Well, first of all, it clearly says that agents sometimes cause their own actions. Furthermore, it allows agents to consider reasons. So nothing about this theory says that agents can't consider reasons. It just says that there's something special about being an agent that allows you to cause something. So you can consider reasons, and that can make a difference in what you do. But since it's the agent itself and not the reasons that cause the action, the reasons don't determine the action. So this fulfills all of the requirements. Some of the implications of this theory are that you cause your own actions, not your mental states, not conditions within you, you. So it's not the fact that you were thinking of a particular thing that causes you to choose one action rather than another. It's you that chooses one action rather than another. Okay, so what argument can we offer in favor of this theory? Taylor is saying if we adopt this theory, the theory of agent causation, then we can solve all the problems of free will. But you might think, this theory is kind of strange. He's saying that there are these things completely outside of nature, and he thinks in general causes are events. But he just says, except for this one special kind of thing, there the self can be a cause. All other causes are events, but not the self. So why should we think this is true? This seems like it's a very strange theory that only comes out of nowhere to solve problems people have found with free will. And his argument is kind of interesting. It goes like this. He says he's more confident in the theory of agent causation than he is in any of the evidence or arguments against it. And this is a really kind of bold argument to just say, sure, you've got a lot of fancy arguments against my view, but I know I'm right. So your arguments have to be wrong, even if I don't exactly know why. Now, why is he so confident in it? Well, he's confident because of the experience of acting. When you do something, it really seems like that experience is you choosing something. You caused it. Similarly, the experience of decision-making. When you think about reasons, it doesn't seem like the reasons themselves cause your action. There's still that point where you think about the reasons and then you make the choice. Furthermore, there's the experience of moral judgment. We judge ourselves and other people morally. We hold people morally responsible for what they do. And when we do that, we assume that they have control or that we have control over what we do. And furthermore, there's a sense of responsibility. So when we do something, we feel responsible for it in a way that seems completely inconsistent with the view that it's just events within us causing things to happen and we don't cause them. So he thinks if our choices are, we have to give up on the idea that we cause our own actions, or we have to accept agent causation. He thinks it's obvious that we should go with agent causation, because the alternative, our own experience shows that the alternative has to be false. Therefore, we should believe that there are non-natural selves or persons that can interrupt the flow of natural events and cause decisions. Okay, so that's the theory, that's his argument. Obviously, the biggest objections to it are that it seems kind of like a cheat. He's just saying we want free will to exist. And in order for free will to exist, my theory has to be true. Therefore, my theory is true. That seems very weak. Furthermore, there might be alternative theories of free will that don't require us to do the same kind of mental gymnastics. And we'll actually look at some of those theories of freedom in the next lectures. All right, so with that in mind, freedom.